never seen a pony that I couldn't stay on, but I've seen the underbelly of a bronc a time or two. And I've been bit, and I've been kicked, and I've been drugged along the fence a time or two. I'm an old bronc saddle, 2 swells and a candle, a rawhide lazy boy. I seen the Penn ponies and the sea lazy S and the North Card rank ones. Here we go now.
Hey, this is episode 63 of Cowboy Shit with Ted and Wacey. Today, we're going through the top 10 greatest bronc riders in Canadian history. And just so you know, they're the bronc riders born in Canada, okay? So just off the bat, don't at me because we didn't include somebody and they lived in Canada or were in Canada for a certain amount of time or were a Canadian champion or whatever. They had to be born in Canada, okay? So that's the deal. This is the show.
Deal with it.
Deal with it. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm looking forward to the comments. Appreciate the feedback. Looking forward to what everybody thinks of the show and hope you enjoy it. It was a fun one to build, wasn't it, Wace?
Yeah, it was cool to kind of do something that was outside of our element. Because, like, as most people know, we're bull riding guys, so it's kind of neat to talk to some people, like talk to some guys who knew saddle bronc riding in and out, and kind of dive a little bit deeper into that.
And there was a lot of questions. Like, if you want to right off the bat, let's just talk markout rule. What do you think, Waze?
Mm-hmm.
Keep the markout rule or dump it? What's it worth?
I would get rid of it. I don't see what value it adds to the show, or like not even to the show, just to the event. Like, well, like, does it really make that much of a difference? Like, most guys mark it out anyway. Like, even when there is no marker, or you see guys in Calgary, they still mark the horse out anyways to like set up your ride.
Gonna get a better score, I think, too, right? It just kind of shows an extra amount of control, doesn't it?
I'd say so, but I don't think it should be
extra aggressiveness.
Yeah, I don't know if it should be like you should be disqualified for not doing it.
Well, it's such a
lot of times.
Sorry, go ahead.
It's hard. There's like a lot of times too. You see, like, where a guy can't mark a horse out, and I mean, you get a free roll or whatever, but it should just be in or out kind of thing.
More judgment on the sides of the officials, I think, doesn't make anything easier. Hey, like, that's
When everything happens ideal. So fast and it's so hard, and like in real time, and like you like calculate in like human error, and I think if you were just to get rid of it, I think you'd just eliminate a lot of confusion and even might make the job a bit easier for the judges. They can pay a bit more attention to their ride as a whole instead of watching that first couple instances of the guy marking a horse out, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, looking at a conversation Storm and I had today was with Don and the crew there, was the fact that it's kind of crazy to even it's kind of wild to even include some of the season stuff. If you look at any other sport, like the NHL doesn't carry any regular season wins into the playoffs. Like, you just got to get into the playoffs, and then once you're there,
you got a chance to win,
right? Like, that actually makes a lot of sense. I get why they add the season stuff when you're talking rodeo. Like, I get the other conversation, but if you really want to get down to it, it makes it harder for the fan to follow what the hell's going on when you got to be like including everything else. You could make
that's where you see in the amateur rodeos where their sudden death format, it works out good for their finals because it kind of plays out as a story narrative, like its own narrative that week, and people can follow along with it, right?
Yeah. I know a guy like Sage. I know a guy like Sage Kimsey wouldn't agree with us right now because he wins a lot of his money during the season, and might not have the best finals. And I mean, I think it adds even more drama, and it puts less emphasis on the regular season, but the regular season is the regular season. It's not the playoffs. So
yeah, I think it would add more drama, like you said, to the whole thing, right? Like, everybody has a chance. Everybody has a chance to win coming in, and it would put more pressure on the top guys coming in. It's like, hey, well, you were the best during the season. Now show us how good you are in the playoffs. Like, even look at like hockey last year. Tampa Bay had a damn near record-breaking season. They got swept in the first round,
right? Which is too bad. That's the format, and that's NHL. Partially why the NHL is where it is, because they have a format that works. So
when we look at every major sports league, that's the way it is. Like, there's you get the bye round. Like, the NFL has their bye rounds, but other than that, it's still like the top teams get in, and it's a clean slate from there, right?
So what do you think about? So the PRCA, like, I could see the PRCA going that route, and they did between, I think, 1976, 77, and 78. Actually, a Canadian, Jim Gladstone, our only tied-on roping world championship came in one of those years. I think it was 76. But it was that way where the NFR was the world champion. If you won the NFR, you were the world champion. So it was that way in the PRCA for a while, and it was that way at the CFR for a very long time until I think like maybe 2000 and I don't know, somewhere. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was 10 or something. Maybe 09, somewhere in there. Maybe I don't know. I don't know what it was exactly. I'd have to look back up. But it was sudden death at CFR from 1974 until like mid 2000s. And then it's changed to follow the PRCA route. But I kind of think about it more and think like, maybe it is worthwhile to just have it at the finals.
I don't know. I think it'd be kind of cool, man. I think it'd add another element of excitement. And I think you'd see, you would see the cream would really rise to the top then too, right? Like,
but I mean, the other argument to that is that's not the cream won't rise to the top. The cream from the week rises to the top, where the guy that rode good all year is not going to get.
Well, it's the same thing. The same thing with like hockey playoffs or baseball playoffs or anything, man. It's just whoever's playing the best at that time is going to win.
At the finals, Where I could see it working with the PRCA, and I think it would actually work. I think it would work better right now because there's so many people that go that don't make the finals. Like, it's one thing to get to the finals, so if you get there, then you win it, then you're the world champ. So I think like I get it, and even if you look, you could do a lot of stuff with it. I'm thinking.
Yeah, I think it would spice it up a little bit.
There would definitely be some people like the purists, the traditionalists that wouldn't agree with it, but
no, which is fair. But I mean, like you said, like that's what separates like
every other major sports
groups from
NFL,
everybody else, right?
NBA, NHL. I want to say,
MLB.
MLB, Major League Soccer, NASCAR. Like, what else? Everybody has playoffs, and like basically it comes down to who wins the last day wins. Where
I think NASCAR is similar to like the rodeo structure.
I think they still have a playoff, and then it's still whoever wins the. Well, they might have points.
Okay, I don't know.
And then even like
I don't know how.
And golf would be more similar to rodeo too, in the fact that some of the regular season stuff counts, but they have big tournaments.
Do you think that would work in the PBR?
See, that's what I'm thinking now, because there's such a gap between the guys in even in 10th place to first, to where if you win the world finals, you're the world champ. Like, but then again, the PBR has one race where rodeo has 7, so the PBR can have space to allow fans to focus on the season and the points coming in, and they do a much better job of showcasing the points. And there's there's points you can see all the time that are updated live. The scoring's live. The point system is explainable to a point. Now we changed it again now, but with the PRC, with the rodeo, you have 7 events to look at, right? Compared to 1 with the PBR. So
that makes sense.
So I get
for sure
their route, but then again, like, and they explain it, and they have the points, they have the structure. So I think they are in a position where they could, because they only have 1 title. So I think like that's where I was going to say too, like the PBR, like I don't think they need to change, because if you change the world finals, then I don't know. That one's tougher to me.
Yeah,
the other ones I think could go, but I think the PBR is already in a good spot.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but back to the markout rule. It's just another phony ass rule that just complicates things and makes it harder for our sport to be followed.
Yeah, I mean, I think in the long run, it would just simplify everything else for the contestants, the fans, and even the judges, right? Like,
yeah,
I think it's one of those things that you wouldn't miss if it was gone, and it wouldn't make a difference if it was.
Yeah, I think you're right. Okay.
Yeah.
So here we are, episode 63. We did another one of these shows on number 53 back in the fall, wasn't it? Like October. We had the show.
Yeah, it would have been.
Had the show with Don Johansson and Chad Bestplug, and did the top 10 greatest Canadian bull riders ever. And this one is the top 10 greatest saddle bronc riders in Canadian history. Great list. A few honorable mentions on there as well. But check out the show here coming up next, the interview with Wayne Vold and Dustin Flundra. Thanks for tuning in. It's Cowboy Shit with Ted and Wacey.
Well, I straddled them ponies with Kenny McLean, Winston Bruce, and even Ivan Daines. The hoofbeat thundered and the crowd went wild, and Casey Tibbs showed them all that style. I'm an old bronc saddle, 2 swells and a cantle, rawhide lazy boy. I seen the Pengelly ponies and the Sea Lazy S and the Northcott rank ones. There they go now.
All right, this is episode number 63 of Cowboy Shit with Ted and Wacey, and we are doing another one of our countdown shows. Wace, it's going to be a pretty good show here today. We've got a couple great guests, and we're going to have a great discussion. What do you think?
It's going to be good. Yeah, it's a little bit outside of our area of expertise, but it's nice to have some experts around and to be able to take the time and chat with us about it. So it should end up pretty good.
Our first guest, he's three-time Canadian champion. Dustin Flundra has qualified for the Canadian Finals Rodeo 15 times, also a three-time qualifier for the Wrangler National Finals Rodeo. Flundra won the Calgary Stampede's $100,000 check in 2014. In 2019, he was selected as the Guy Weedick Award winner, a crowning achievement of any career. With the career earnings over $1 million from Pincher Creek, Alberta, please welcome Dustin Flundra. Thanks for being on the show today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. I like how you called me an expert there in Wacey. It's not.
Oh, I mean, you're more of an expert than I am.
Yeah, of all the things that I've been called, I don't know if an expert in any field is one of them. But no, glad to be here.
Thanks for taking the time to do this, Dustin. I got our next guest lined up, and I have this special bio that I wrote for him for the Pendleton Roundup back in 2017, and it's a bit more elaborate. So please don't take offense that this one's longer, but he's the son of legendary Harry Vold. Mr. Wayne Vold didn't take long to begin his own journey into the spotlight and a similar highly regarded place in rodeo's history books. At 13 years old, his first title came at the Calgary Stampede in the boys steer riding. 2 years later, he was a Canadian champion in the novice saddle bronc, and at 22 and 23 years old, Vold would earn back-to-back Canadian saddle bronc riding championships. In those years, the 2008 Canadian Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame inductee would launch the Wayne Vold Rodeo Co., which has gone on to win nearly every major stock contracting championship in North America. Vold's all-star team has included the likes of Try Me, American Express, Hagar, Rambo, Sugar Ray, Awesome, Pedro, True Grit, Mucho Dinero, and Cooper's Comet. At the same time, Wayne picked up for 25 years at stops such as the Calgary Stampede, Pendleton Roundup, Ponoka Stampede, a once record of 11 times at the Canadian Finals Rodeo in Edmonton and twice at the National Finals Rodeo in Las Vegas. That's not all. The nationally syndicated Wayne Vold Show aired for 3 years on CTV, featuring musical talent from around the world, all during Vold's illustrious stock contracting career. Today, Vold hangs his hat west of High River, Alberta, working with nephew and bullman Nansen Vold. Wayne Vold Rodeo provides stock for and produce a number of Canada's top rodeos, from Grand Prairie, Wainwright to Morris, Manitoba, and the Ponoka Stampede. Vold can also be found each December at the Wrangler NFR, proudly singing the national anthem on Canadian Night. Welcome, Mr. Wayne Vold.
Oh, thank you, Ted. You wrote that. I don't know where you found all that stuff.
Yeah, I figured I better throw that in there since I had it. It's probably going to be the biggest intro of anybody ever on the show, but had to get all that stuff in there. Okay, so today we're talking the greatest bronc riders in Canadian history. Back on episode 50, we talked with Don Johansson and Chad Bestplug about the top 10 greatest bull riders ever from Canada. And since we all had a bit of time here right now, I figured we would make a plan. We actually talked about doing this show back at the end of February, but we weren't all quite in the same place. And Dustin, you were in Houston, and that ended up you getting cut short for probably the first time ever.
Yeah, actually, I think it is the first time ever since it started. It wasn't really my plan. I was supposed to be part of my rehabilitation holiday, and yeah, my whole holiday and everything got cut short. And we decided that instead of spending a month in Houston, we were only going to spend a couple of weeks and come back home to what is usually springtime when we get home, but turns out this year it's still winter. So on top of all the rest of the stuff that's going on in the world, I guess.
Yeah, quite the time we're dealing with right now. What tell us about what Houston was like though when that all happened there. That must have been pretty wild.
Well, kind of surreal, really. I mean, we were sitting there and things had been going great. I mean, it had come up a little bit in conversation that there'd been some pressure, from some of the people in the city that had, didn't think that they should be having an event like that, and it was at a bit of a risk. But at the time, there was nothing had really there wasn't anything that had happened in the States really as far as like cases and stuff. It was, fairly small, just like the rest of the world outside of China. There really wasn't anything going on at the time. And so it didn't really seem like anything was going to happen. I mean, it's the biggest fair and economic drivers in almost all of in the entire state of Texas, just about. So you kind of don't really expect it to happen. And we'd done 7 or 8 perfs, I guess. And I was sitting in the trailer watching our youngest son. And all of a sudden, Nikki called me the afternoon of the 9th, what's supposed to be the 9th performance, and said they just canceled the rodeo. And everybody was basically, it happened at about 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the afternoon. They said it was done, and they said you had till 4 o'clock to get your stuff out of the arena. And everybody was, it actually didn't end up being that big of a rush or anything like that. It was not what I kind of expected once we got there, but it was all sort of, I can't believe it was really happening. Sort of like, you don't really expect it. And I mean, there was no warning sign until that day. Basically, the mayor and the health authority decided that they were just going to pull the card out underneath of the committee. The committee had no intentions of shutting the rodeo down at the time, and they didn't really have a say. All of a sudden, they lost their approval from however it goes about. I mean, but so it's kind of weird. And we loaded up and headed to our friend's place in Weatherford at the Diamond S Bucking Bull Ranch, and stayed there for a couple days till it quit snowing at home and on the way in Wyoming, so we could get home. And basically been home for months now, I guess, just hanging out at the ranch, starting to calve cows.
What day was it that they canceled it like that? Like they gave you 4 hours to get out of there? That's not very long for anybody.
Yeah, like it was, like honest to God, they called basically all the contestants or sent out an email or had somebody go around. It was about noon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and it was on, let me see, I'll go back here, I can figure this out. The 11th of March. They called and said, the contestants and stuff had, we had horses and stuff there. We had a little bit more time because we're not maybe on the same thing, but anybody in the building, he said, if you have your stuff in here, you got till 4 o'clock. And we were loading up. I think we left the stadium at about 4:30 or whatnot, and they were taking panels and stuff down. They had their crew. They were cleaned up. Everything was basically out of the stadium except for essential employees and essential stuff. It was all gone already. It happened fast. All of it, the cancellation and everybody leaving. It was all happened pretty quick.
And that was the same day that the NBA would suspend their season, and the NHL went down the next day. So it all kind of happened at the same time.
Like fairly quickly. It was kind of like surreal. And then just, that time it was listening to the radio and like, God, I can't believe they're canceling all these things at the time. But I guess they have now, and here we are.
So you're in Houston, you guys get back, and now it's snowy here. It's kind of been crappy.
Yeah, it has been since we come home. I got home. When we decided we did come home, which would have been about 4 or 5 days after they canceled Houston. We stayed in Weatherford, like I said, at the Diamond S Bucking Bull place. We're pretty good friends with Scott and Kelly Pickens, who run that place. And we left and we drove straight through from Weatherford to home. And when I got home, we had about a foot of snow on the ground, and I just drove the truck and the trailer straight into my yard, which isn't what I typically do, but I figured I had nowhere to go and no place to be. So I parked it in a snowdrift, and it stayed there for about 3 weeks until I could move it. It kept snowing here, and we've seen lots of winter. But I mean, part of it for myself is I had shoulder surgery in the end of December. So for me, I guess I haven't had a whole bunch of stuff that I can do. It's changed my physio and the rehab side of it has kind of changed a little bit. There's a lot more communication that I do with my doctor over the phone, which makes some of it kind of complicated. I mean, not really knowing where I should be myself and him trying to explain it and stuff. So I've seen him once, but like my physiotherapy is, I mean, the gym's all closed down and everything like that. So, I mean, yes, it is what it is. It's definitely changed a lot of things. But as far as some of my work stuff, the fact that it's still winter has been easy on me because I really can't do a whole bunch yet.
Is it your intention to come back and compete again, Dustin?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, kind of was. I guess if there's no rodeo season, I don't know what happens. I mean, I'm all kind of up in the air. I was hoping that I would be ready to go by June 1st kind of thing. That would be, around the 6 months sort of mark. And they kind of gave me 6 to 9 months as far as rehab goes. But like I said, it's been different. Not being able to go to physio and see my physiotherapist and not being able to see my doctor and stuff. It's kind of, I don't know all the time if I'm where I should be or if I'm behind or if I'm ahead or, whatnot. It's hard for me to know where it's supposed to be at. And it's hard for them too, to be like, this is kind of where it's at without, kind of seeing firsthand what some of that stuff looks like. So I like everybody else, I guess I'm going to wait and see position for everything. And I mean, it's just, this whole year is just really kind of crazy now. I mean, I'm not the only one, I guess. Being injured, the longer it goes for me on things hold up, then the better chance it is that I'm healthy, I guess.
Yeah.
But it's just the whole world seems like it's on its ear right now to me.
Definitely. It's I don't know how to explain it or describe it or nothing. We'll get to look back someday and think it was pretty wild. So
yeah.
I gotta ask Wayne, how have you been spending your time in the last month, I guess already now? You this is a slower time of year for most of us right now anyways, but tell us what you've been doing, Wayne.
I just been home, Ted. It's there's nothing happening. Our first rodeo was Stavely first week of May, and of course it went down, and then our next rodeo was Grand Prairie, and it went down, and then Rocky Mountain House would have been our next one, and it went down. And I just talked to Art Moline today in Wainwright, and they're still holding on, and Ponoka's holding on, and I'm just hoping that we're going to get to go to one of them, them first rodeos, and of course Calgary Stampede. If we could go to as a bull rodeo could go to Wainwright, Ponoka, and Calgary, it'd be wonderful. But other than that, I haven't, I've just been home and feeding the horses, and I bought a few new horses this winter. Actually, a couple of them just got delivered here today from Andy Jones, who's been keeping them for me, and I think they're nice horses, and we're sort of all dressed up, Ted, and know where to go.
Yeah. I guess the season, you've got a few new horses. The season looks like there might not end up being a whole lot we get to go with here at this rate right now. But even if we got to go, or where I figured out what it was. So even if these rodeos still happen, and we're all got our fingers crossed, hoping that they're still allowed to go, but it wouldn't be a possibility really with a place like a Wainwright or Ponoka to go without people in the stands. They need the people there to make these events work, don't they?
No, absolutely. They're not going to go unless they, all the bans are lifted, and the government controls that. They're just hanging on as long as they can. And I think one guy on the Ponoka committee said this thing came in a hurry and it could leave in a hurry. So, that's their attitude. Some guy, some rodeos have rescheduled, and no, but it's the unknown. No, nobody knows. I mean, my first rodeo would be Wainwright. I'd be real happy to start there. Wainwright, Ponoka, and Calgary, and then we go to Morris as far as Vold Rodeo goes, and back to Strathmore and just on, and we could maybe salvage a half a year or something. But right now, I mean, we're just sitting here at home, and I don't go anywhere. I go to town maybe once a week or every 10 days or something, just to get groceries and stuff. And that's scary enough on its own, I guess. If you watch enough television, they'll terrify you that you won't go anywhere.
That's why I don't watch the news on a good day, let alone now.
No, exactly. Now we're just home, and like I said, I just feed my horses, and I don't go anywhere. At least I can, go out in the field, and walk around. I guess some people are stuck in a house or an apartment and can't go anywhere. So, but we'll just ride it out. I'm optimistic. Bull rodeo's alive and well, ready to go, and Nance has been bucking bulls and trimming off some that don't buck, and we're ready. It's just, where can we go? That's the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and what else have you guys been keeping busy at home though? Like, what is there anything new? You said you've been watching a bunch of the Ozark stuff too on the Netflix.
I watched all of Ozark. I'm into the Vikings, and actually the Vikings are my ancestors, and I didn't know they were that bad. Norwegians. But yeah, we do a lot of Netflix, and just like, what do you do? It's just decide what you're going to have for supper. It's kind of like being in jail, only there's no warden.
Yeah. I had another question for you on postponements. Would Ponoka move back dates if they can't go July 1st? Wainwright, any of those ones? It sounds like Calgary, if they can't go on their date, they're not going to go at all this year. But will Wainwright or Ponoka push back? Don't know that. Yeah.
I can't answer that. I mean, they're, like Ponoka got so many volunteers, and they take their, I don't know, 2,500 volunteers or whatever it is, and they take their holidays to go there. And, if they were going to try and go on the long weekend of September or something, I suppose it would be it would be a thought. I'm not saying that they even mentioned it, but I mean, they'd have to, all their volunteers, they'd have to get them, and it'd be a nightmare if, to switch. I would like to see them all go a little later, because, if not, we're not going to have much for rodeos, and that's not looking good.
Yeah. I wanted to ask anyways. I wasn't sure. I hadn't heard a lot of updates from some of the different shows, so thanks for the insight there. Let's get started on this list, though. So we did our bull riding list. We had that story out and talked about the top 10. Ended up being Daryl Mills at the top of our list. He was the world champion in 1994. Was a two-time Canadian champion, made the NFR 4 different times. Was reserve champ, won the finals. He ended up with about 250 points on our list, and based on my first, I guess you would say, initial assessment of this, we've got our first place guy in the bronc riding has 650 points, and just to make the list at this point is over 200. So it's a lot more. I guess we could say, first off, the bronc riding. There was one stat, and Dustin, you were the last person on this list, but a Canadian bronc rider made the NFR for the first 54 years. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Something like that. Doesn't seem wrong to me.
And that was because you were the last guy on that streak in 2010. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And then you were the first one back in 14.
I was the only one. I was the only bronc rider there the first 2 years that I went. I mean, the 1 year in 2010, Rod was supposed to be there, but that was also the year that he broke his leg, and then after I kind of had some injury trouble and missed it a couple of years, there was nobody there for a while until Zeke and Clay and Jake and those guys come along. So, and
Tyrell too, Leighton, yeah, a couple of those guys. So, but I would say when we were doing that list for the bull riders, a couple comments came in right off the bat where a few people said it'd be great to do the bronc riding because there's so much. I'm not sure what the word is right now, but there's a ton of success in bronc ride. Like, there's a lot of great bronc riders that have come from Canada, and there's a lot of great bucking horses that have come from Canada as well. Let you speak to that first, Wayne.
Yeah, well, what I did, Kat, is I put the bronc riding list that you have in their era sort of thing. And if I may, you know, like Carl Olson, I don't know anything about him. His stats were what they are. I never seen him ride. I've seen all the other guys ride, and in the era of Winston Bruce, Kenny McLean, and Marty Woods, that was a tough era. And I rode at the tail end of that era, and it looked like everybody was riding for fourth when them guys were riding. And then the next era that I sort of put in a category was Mel Hyland, Mel Coleman, Dwayne Dane, sort of in that era, you know, tough era. And then Rod Hay and Rod Warren were sort of in the next era, and then Zeke Thurston sort of in his own era. And I just want to say one thing, that it's tough to put a category on these guys because of the Buckenor situation. And fortunately, I got to watch all these generations of cowboys and horses, because I started doing it when I was pretty young. And what I'm going to say is that every era, I think the horses got better. You know, like back in Winston and Kenny and Marty's day, there was some good horses, but like a guy like Harry Knight would maybe have 7, 8 really good horses, and Lynn Butler and all that. Well, and then you move into Mel Hyland, Mel Coleman, and Dwayne Danes, and the horses were better. And the reason they were getting better is because everybody was raising them. And then you get into Rod Hay and Rod Warren era, the horses got better again, and up to Zeke Thurston's era, where I think the horses are the best they've ever been. Absolutely, because there's just more of them. You know, instead of having, you know, 8 or 10 or 12, you know, really good horses, you know, 40 years ago, there would be, you know, 40, 50 really good horses. And then now they take 105 horses to the NFR, and basically, you know, they're all pretty good.
And they continue to improve.
Well, yeah. The thing is that most people are breeding them, you know, and then there's a lot of horse breeders out there that are raising them, and, you know, selling them at sales or to the, you know, privately to their stock contractors. And I just think it'll get better and better. I mean, you know, back when Marty and Winston and Kenny rode, like I said, there was a handful of good horses, but there's, you know, 25 times as good horses now. There's no doubt in my mind, and that's my opinion anyway.
So in your list, Wayne, you have talked about and mentioned every single of the top 10 that I've kind of assembled here so far based on stats. And the list that I put together, I ranked the guys over the years. And the point system that I have at this point is that a world title is worth 100 points, an NFR title is worth 40 points, NFR qualification is 20 points, and a Canadian title is 10 points. I completely made it up, to be totally honest, but I ranked them all this way, and it kind of I think it worked for the most part in the bull riding list, and it kind of is an objective way to rank the different contestants. But I'm going to start off here and just kind of cruise down the list. But before I do that, Dustin, let's talk about your thoughts on the list so far, and where you would kind of put the 10 bronc riders on this list at this point.
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to agree with Wayne on a little bit of it, you know, when it comes to horses, and I feel like in their era, those were the best guys. And I think you could probably move any of these guys into any one of the era, any era, or as Wayne put it, and they would probably, you know, be at the top of the game in whatever era they were in. But yeah, and Wayne's got to see a few more of them ride than I have that are on this list. But yeah, there's got to know quite a few of them, got to ride against some of them, and every one of them is pretty good. And you can make a case for any one of them that they could move up or down in this, you know, preliminary list that we have. That, you know, you could easily move one down and two up, and they're all pretty amazing in their own right in any period in time that you would put them in.
So we have a couple debates to start off with. On our bull riding list, there was a few people that I missed because I initially went out, and I have it on my desk right now, but I initially went through the 2015 PRCA media guide, and I put a blue mark beside every Canadian in their final standing in the world standings, and it goes back all the way back to like the 1940s. So I have kind of tabs on every Canadian address to have ever qualified for the NFR, and it has their final standings in the season as well. So I went based on that and qualifications and whatnot. But where it gets a bit muddy is, do we count a guy like Glenn O'Neill, who was born in Australia but now calls Canada home, the 2002 world champion, made the NFR 11 times, won the NFR average in 02, 2000 Canadian champion, and he was the 2001 and 2003 reserve world champ. Glenn O'Neill, do we count him on the list of greatest Canadian bronc riders ever, or not? What are your thoughts, Wayne?
Well, he lives in Canada now. I mean, if you're just going on guys that are born here, I mean, that's one thing. I mean, he's a Canadian now, and he definitely, goes right among the best. Absolutely, there's no doubt about Ben O'Neill. I had the pleasure of him rodeoing around the old rodeo for his whole career pretty well, and I'd put him in there. I mean,
you'd put him on the list of greatest Canadian.
He's a transplant, but what rules are we going by anyway? What does it really matter?
Yeah, I guess so. I've got more than 10 names here, so I'm trying to get it down to 10, and I'm not sure if I count someone that wasn't born in Canada. But then if I'm doing that, then do we include Pete Knight, who was born in, I believe, let me look at here really quick, but he was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and passed away in Hayward, California. And it looks like, based on this, he was only 34 years old, so didn't have a very long career in the rodeo business. But do we count a guy?
I don't know anything about Pete Knight other than I've seen a few pictures. And Carl Olson, I don't know anything about him, so I really don't have a comment on them to compare them to these guys. I guess in their era, 60 or 70 years ago or whatever it was, I've only seen Pete Knight on, some horses kind of raring and, no flank strap and stuff. It's pretty hard for me to make a judgment on a guy like Pete Knight or Carl Olson.
What are your thoughts on this as far as our list goes, Dustin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on those guys. I mean, it's so long ago, I don't think anybody. It's hard to rank somebody when you've only read a story, or you see a postcard picture here or there. I mean, you can make the case. I'm not going to say that they're not great bronc riders and that they weren't in their time. I mean, they have the buckles and the cup, the stuff that they won to go with it. Can I make a strong argument that Pete Knight rode better than anybody else? I'd never got to see it. I didn't even get to see a video. The horses were definitely different. So I guess if that's on those guys, I just have to go on what your point system would go, and that would be the only argument that I could make on them. Glenn, I would say, I mean, to me, he's almost probably lived in Canada now as long as he's lived in Australia. I traveled with him forever. Married to a Canadian, he lives up here. I'd like to claim him. I mean, whenever he went to the NFR when I was a kid, or still before I got to travel with him when I was in my late teens and stuff like that, I considered him at the time, as much as anything else, that he was flying two flags when he went there. In my eyes, lots of times, he was representing both Australia and Canada. So I don't know, put an asterisk next to his name and.
Yeah, we might have to
move them up the list. In my eyes, it's my opinion, and the general public can argue about whether we're right or wrong after.
Okay, well, that's part of what we're doing here. We want to create some conversation and debate it a little bit. So Wayne has mentioned Carl Olson a couple of times. So Carl Olson is the 1947 world champion, looks like three-time Canadian champion, 1945, 46, and 48. And in 1948, he was the reserve world champion. So based on our point system, and at that time in the 40s, there was no NFR. So technically, he could have another 80 points in at least 4 NFR qualifications if we were doing that. But that's a whole nother conversation that would go down in the same facet with Pete Knight in the 30s with no NFR as well. So based on this, he would have technically another 4 NFRs just based on what we know on on 4 world titles, so that would put him number 10 with 210 points, and that's not including Glenn O'Neill being on the list with 370, but we don't know if he's Canadian or not. We haven't defined that yet. So number 10, we've got Carl Olsen. Then, based on this list that I have, I've got number 9, Winston Bruce. He's the 1961 world champion, 2-time Canadian champion in 1957 and 58, and made the NFR 10 times. That puts him in at 320 points. But do we rank Winston ahead of Rod Warren when Rod wasn't a world champion but won the NFR average 4 times? What are your thoughts?
Well, totally different bronc riders. The thing about Rod Warren, he spurred everything out, and you couldn't buck him off, in my opinion. And he was always there for the long haul. And he did in Vegas. He proved that. He was an average. He won the average several times, and because he spurred them all out, and he was very hard to buck off. So that's and had his style of bronc riding. Now Winston Bruce was a different style totally, and I think Winston Bruce is one of the smartest bronc riders that I ever watched. I'd seen him on Big John of Harry Knights, who was the rage of 50 years ago or whatever, in San Francisco, and it just comes to memory when you mention Winston and Big John. He kind of jumped and kicked out of there, and about 4 seconds he run into the wall, and what do you do? So Winston, he just spurred him out again for another 2 jumps. It was the smartest bronc rider I ever seen, and I was with Leo Brown and Les Johnson, and they said, well, that's the smartest bronc rider we've ever seen. There's 2 different styles of guys, and so it's pretty tough to pick something in there.
And the only difference I have here is, if you're going between those 2, you've got they're both 2-time Canadian champions. Winston has 1 more NFR qualification. Winston's a world champion, but Rod won the NFR average 4 different times, which is quite an impressive feat, and 3 times in a row between 2003, 4, and 5. Pretty impressive.
The thing is that when kids are learning how to ride broncs, there's 2 or 3 things you can tell them. It's like playing golf; you can't remember everything. One of the main things is lift on your rein, okay? And I'm going to say that Winston Bruce's dad, Lawrence Bruce, almost invented that lifting on the rein. Winston rode with a full hand, which means the buck rein wasn't in between his little finger. And he rode with a full hand. When you have a full hand, you cannot pull on a horse's head, I promise you. And Winston lifted on his rein, and any of the pictures you see of him, he almost invented that lifting on the rein thing. And he's way up on my list about of all these guys. I mean, there's several different styles, but Winston was, I guess, for lack of a better word, was a machine. Okay.
Yeah, Winston. I'd put Winston fairly high up on my own list as well. Smart guy, in and out of the rodeo. He knows. Yeah, he knew so much about bronc riding and rodeo, and just like looking at the handful of videos and talking to Winston over the years, we got to be really good friends. He'd call me out of the blue every once in a while, and we just talked nothing but rodeo. But I mean, he knew the game, knew everything that it took, and the way that he did it, and it could break it down into such a science. And like he's super high on my list. And I mean, if I have to put a value on something, I'll value a world title over an average title myself if we're going to get picky about things. But yeah, I mean, phenomenal guy. Could turn. There's not one picture, like Wayne said, that you will ever look at where his rein is not in the perfectly right spot, where it's out in front of him, hand rolled over, slacks all out of it. That's the hardest thing in bronc riding to learn and to teach. I mean, it's that I always say, if it's the first thing you need to learn and the last thing that you probably do, and he had that part worked out like down to a science, like Wayne said.
Dustin, I remember when you and the novice bronc riding at Edmonton and talking to you about lifting on your rein. I don't know if you remember that or not, but it's the first rule, It's the first rule, lift on your rein.
Yep.
And tell me more about that. I'm curious about that, Dustin. Like you, if I remember you right, you always put your rein through your pinky. Is that more of a benefit now or not, or how does that?
It really all comes down to like a personal preference thing as far as whether it's, a full fist or if you go through your finger. For myself, I've done it both ways. I prefer to go through my finger. It was as much as anything else. It just feels more comfortable to myself to hold my rein in my hand that way. I didn't really, I have pictures of myself riding both ways. And if you look at it, unless you really look close, you wouldn't even know the difference. So I don't handle it any different myself, but my big thing is I go a little shorter on it, on the rein side of things than a lot of guys do anyway. I kind of would rather be pulled on a little bit, and sometimes I guess that can be an asset for me and it can be a detriment, but yeah, it's a big part of bronc riding. But as far as the hand goes, I just chalk it up to its personal preference to what feels better. Wayne might have different insight as to on that, but yeah, myself, it was just a comfort thing, and I like it through the finger.
Well, one thing that you mentioned was that you couldn't pull on a horse's head when you had a full fist of rein. Would you speak more to that?
I'm not saying you can't pull on one, but I don't think you can pull on one as much. And I think Dustin would probably agree with me there. I don't like guys pull on a horse's head. I want them all to lift on their rein because some horses can't take it very good. And so when that lifting on the rein was invented, and I don't know who invented it more than Winston's dad. This goes back a long ways, just stories I've heard. And I don't think you can pull on a horse as much with a full hand as you can with, through the finger, personally. I had that full hand myself, and it was a little awkward for me. So I always went, through the finger, but I think you can get a hold of one's head and I think with a full hand, you can lift on it better, and you can't pull on them as much. And I think freedom is a good thing for most bucking horses, freedom of the head.
So we're going back to this list, and I actually didn't have it in the right order, because after Winston in number 9, based on the points, Zeke Thurston would be 8th. He's the 2016 and 2019 world champion, 2019 Canadian champion, 5-time NFR qualifier, won the average of the NFR in 2016, and he's already got $1.2 million in career earnings. So he'd be at 350 points, 10 behind Rod Warren, based on these points. Again, Zeke's a 2-time world champ, and based on these points, which I'm wondering if the system needs to be tweaked a little bit. A 2-time world champion is behind a guy that won the average 4 times. But then again, Zeke is only 5 years into his professional career, maybe 6 years. What are your thoughts on that, Dustin?
I think, truthfully, my opinion, I think Zeke Thurston's just getting started. I think he's only just showing us glimpses of what's still to come. As far as bronc riders go, in my own opinion, lots of them, Zeke's just coming into the part where you really kind of mature and figure out what's really going on, and that he's already where he's at this age. I feel like the things that he's going to show us and do are just he hasn't even got there yet, in my opinion.
So he's got more time. So that's part of the skewing. Why this list might be skewed is because he hasn't had a full career yet.
Well, yeah, everybody on the list right now currently, other than Zeke, is hung it up. If we have this same conversation 5 years from now, you could probably there's a good chance that he could be bumped up all the way to the number 1 guy and still be rodeoing. I think there's a lot more to come from that guy, in my opinion. So
we've got what are your thoughts on that question though, that question, Wayne, where Zeke's a 2-time world champ and he's behind Rod Warren on this list? Is that an issue when we're ranking the greatest, or is that okay when Rod's had a full career and been to the NFR 9 times, 4 times he won the average. I'm curious what your thoughts are.
You're asking me, Ted?
Yeah.
Well, I agree with Dustin. I mean, I think Zeke has got, he's right up at the top of my list. One of them, like we're supposed to be picking this. It's a little tough because Zeke he's only been around since 215 or 216. I watched him win the world in Vegas. He hasn't even reached his potential of what he's going to win yet. So if we project, barring injury or whatever, if I was to project what he would be, he'd probably, have to go right to the top of my list. I mean, he's the ultimate. And the only thing I will go back to is that Zeke has got more good horses to ride at, probably than the Marty Winston and Kenny era, and probably even the Rod Hayes and that era. So, because I think the horses are getting that much better, as we go, and I think, like Zeke's got a better chance of drawing a good horse, as he goes down the road. But projection wise, I would, you can't stop this guy. I seen him ride on the video. I just seen a video of that Pollockville on special delivery, and that's about as good as it gets in the bronc ride. And I wasn't there, but I mean, that was the real deal. And he's just full of that stuff, So he's pretty hard for me not to project for him and put him way up there.
I think we've all seen Glenn's 95 on Airwolf and Innisfail, and I don't know if I've seen Doug's 95 was it Transport in Meadow Lake, the other 95-point ride?
Yeah.
What did you guys, either of you see Doug's 95-point ride?
I have of it. Wayne's probably seen it a million times. I guess
I've seen it once.
How do you guys?
Doug tries to show it to me every day, but I don't watch it.
How do you two rank that those two 95s against Zeke?
I watched Glenn O'Neill and on Airwolf and Innisfail. Totally different kind of horses. Transport was the kind of a bronc rider's dream. He had no power. He had a lot of jump and kick. He was just real good to ride. Yeah, Doug handled his rein that day, and I thought and placed his feet. I mean, I'm not going to debate whether that's a 95 or O'Neill a 95 or what. I mean, but they were, okay? So they marked them 95. And totally different rides, totally different horses. And, but like you said, they're in the books.
That's part of the going over the eras. Wacey and I talked last show about some of the greatest rides in the PBR history and how the scoring has maybe changed from the early 2000s and back to even further with these bronc rides. But it's fun to discuss anyways. But so I've reworked this list a bit more, and I'm putting an asterisk by Glenn O'Neill and Pete Knight, since we can't confirm if they are truly Canadian for the sake of this list. So that brings me down one more spot to number 10. I actually have Dwayne Danes with 7 NFR qualifications, and the 1991 Canadian champion brings him in at 190 points. So that'd put him in number 10, and then 20 points ahead of him would be Carl Olsen. What are your guys' thoughts on that? Am I missing anyone else that would be close, or is Dwayne that number 10?
Go ahead, Dustin.
I was gonna say, I guess if we're gonna put an asterisk by those other guys, I guess, I mean, if we're gonna use the point system, Dwayne would have to go in there. I mean, he was pretty damn sure deserving enough. I mean, he made the NFR as many times as he did, and I mean, just to make the NFR once is a pretty good notch in anybody's belt. There's a lot goes into it. It's not the hardest rodeo in the world to qualify for because it's easy. There's no doubt about that. So I guess I won't argue with you, Ted.
You've been there 3 times yourself, Dustin. Talk about just the journey to get there. It's not an easy task.
No, there's nothing about it that's very easy. It's usually ends up there's parts of the summer and the year that can turn into be a real grind, and then there's other parts of it where it's, always where you're just living like there's never going to be another bad day. And the guys that, generally make it in that top 15 are the guys that handle those highs and those lows the best and can ride it out and stay consistent through the entire year and capitalize on their big moments when you get them, because you don't necessarily, there's always good horses, but you don't always get the best horse at the biggest rodeo all the time. And when you get those ones, those are the moments where you can't let them get away. I mean, when you're, on the short round in Cheyenne and you got Medicine Woman or something like that, or you're at Canoka and you got Pedro, you gotta, that's your moment to put your exclamation on something and take it, because it's hard to make it up at some of them other little rodeos, and sometimes it doesn't always work out, and then that's where you end up having to grind it out at some of the smaller rodeos or whatnot that through the course of the year, and you're gonna have the highs and the lows and stuff like that. But yeah, it's every day is a new day and a new rodeo, and it's taking those lows and forgetting about them and continuing to ride on those high spots when you got them are the guys that get there.
I'll just do a short add on to what he's saying. It's just like what I think makes winners, and as I've watched them all through the years, is if they get the good horses and they take advantage of the situation, then that makes winners. And if you screw up, and I've seen guys fall off in the 100,000 for Calgary, and seen guys ride for the 100,000, in Calgary. But if you take advantage of them good situations, then I think that makes you, that makes you a winner in my book. That's why on my list here, why I'd like some of these guys, go to the, towards the top of my list, because they took advantage of a good situation and they didn't screw it up.
Yeah, you want those big high pressure moments all the time. The guys that are on this list and the guys that succeed in anything want that. They want that moment. That's the moment they're looking for all the time, and they capitalize when they get it. You want to put yourself in the big moment all the time, and every time that you get the big moment, you don't let it slip away. And those guys that can do that and don't cave under the pressure once they get there are the guys that'll beat you 9 out of 10 times.
Didn't it? Sorry, go ahead, Wayne.
It's like making a 4 foot putt in golf for $500 with your buddies. I mean, like, pressure is an amazing thing, and some guys cave under it, and some guys thrive on it. And I just reiterate, I can't, say enough, for those that win, they don't cave under pressure, because pressure gets a lot of people. I mean, it's just, some guys get wobbly on it, and some guys thrive on it. And I think, these guys on this list, when we start winding it down, are the ones that thrived on pressure, and the people that caved, well, they obviously were 1/4 or 5th.
Dustin, going back to qualifying for the finals, was it down to Hannah for you one year? Is that right? Am I remembering right, or was that somebody else, like a Tandem Island in the last few years?
No, it had the one year. It come right down to the very last rodeo. I was entered at everything the last weekend. Yeah, it was nip and tuck, but Troy Krauser was who I was kind of battling it out with. And I mean, I think the last, I shouldn't say that I needed to place at every rodeo. I mean, I had Omaha made in both the Champions Challenge and the Tour finale that year, and I didn't draw very good, and I didn't do it. And then it come down to, Kansas City, Brooks, Hannah, a whole bunch of other little rodeos, and Troy and I were the same thing, and it ended up being that, like, I come down, and I mean, I can't say that there was more pressure anytime to qualify for the NFR than that year for me. And it was, every rodeo of my last 10 was a battle. I mean, I would place, and Troy would place too, and then I'd go to the next one and I'd place and Troy would place too. The thing that come down to it was I placed a little further ahead of Troy a couple more times.
Yeah.
It was like the very last rodeo on the entire schedule that year was Hannah. It was the only rodeo, and it was the very last rodeo that could have done it for me. And it was the smallest rodeo of the whole year, I think, prize money, purse wise. And yeah, I won second, and made it by $150 or $170 or something like that.
How much of the 100,000 you won in Calgary that summer went towards qualifying for the finals that year?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't say there was a whole bunch, because I had some other wins along the way that looked after it. But I guess the moment where it got away, where I could have clinched it that year and I could have done it early, was in Kennewick at the Champions Challenge. I walked up and I wanted spring planting, and I plucked spring planting out of the hat. And it was about the fifth time that I'd had spring planting. And it always worked out pretty good for me. And I probably made the best ride on spring planting that I'd ever made, but I missed it out. And
no.
I mean, that was about a $600 or $6,500 win, and I would have had the finals made then. And I mean, there was nobody else but myself to blame. And because that happened, I ended up having to go to a lot more rodeos than I had planned to go to. And I mean, some of it was I hadn't really rodeoed super hard up until that point. So I guess I left myself with lots of room to go and try to catch up. The problem is that once it gets kind of tricky, or it's not tricky, it's just the size of the rodeos kind of after you get to Pendleton aren't the same. So your opportunity to make big money kind of starts to, dry up a little bit. So you end up going to more rodeos and some smaller ones. And, I sure needed them. I'm glad I had the extra rodeos left on my rodeo count. And I still had lots of rodeos left that year. But yeah, the one that if I could ever have back would be, the one time I missed spring planting out to have the NFR made by the first part of August instead of the last rodeo of the year. That would probably be the moment.
Do we want to get into the debate about the markout rule right now briefly, or should we leave that for another time?
I think that's another 2-hour chapter.
Okay, moving on. So we've got number 5. We've got so I've got to recap so far. First half, I'm putting Dwayne Danes 10, Carl Olson number 9, Winston Bruce 8, Zeke Thurston 7, Rod Warren 6, 5.5 is Glenn O'Neill based on the citizenship. And now we're going into our second half. Number 5. Outright, I have Mel Coleman, 16 consecutive NFRs from 1974 to 89, and 7 Canadian titles.
So are we going to start picking these guys? Is this what it is or what?
Yeah, I'm just running down the list of the point totals. But what do you think? Do we like Mel Coleman in number 5, or where are we at?
Well, if we have to go by, I mean, I'm not really going by the stats, Ted.
That's okay.
Mean, I'm just going, I have a list of what I think, who the, number 10 to 1 are. And if you go by stats, and you're a statistician and I'm not. But, like the thing is that, some guys turned them all out and never got bucked off. And maybe somebody else, rode classier and all this stuff. So if you get the stats in it, and if that's the way, way you're going to pick them, I guess, we do that. But I have my own opinion on who I think rode the best and was he good on horses and all around good people. And I'm not much of a stat guy.
That's all right. So, but where would you rank Mel Coleman though? With I don't think anybody else. I'd have to look at the list here a little bit closer, but I think
Mel Coleman and Miles Holland and Dwayne Danes were in pretty well the same era, and if you put them 3 guys today, they would win, and if they'd win right alongside of Zeke Thurston. So like I did when I put them in their eras, I got Winston, Kenny, Marty, and then I got Mel Highland, Mel Coleman, Dwayne Daines in their era, and then I got Roddy Hay and Rod Warren, and then Zeke is sort of in his own era. And it's just a matter of, of preference. If we're going to, if you go by the stats, whether I agree or not probably doesn't matter. But I have my opinions, and the stats aren't not really getting it for me.
Well, let's just talk another way then about Mel Coleman. I don't know him that well, and know his story, but he's got the most consecutive qualifications to the NFR, and it's one of the top stats in the whole PRCA to make the finals 16 times in a row. That just speaking, would you just tell us about him a little bit? I don't know his story very much.
Yeah, I knew Mel real well, and he rode real good. There's no doubt about it. And he like he was in the era of Mel Highland and and Dwayne Daines, and solid competitor. Like hard to throw off. I thought he handled his rein and set his feet good. He obviously deserves to be in here. And if you put him back in the era of Winston, Kenny, and Marty, he'd have won money. And if you'd have moved him up to Rod Hay and Rod Warren, he like he was probably in the tail end of the Roddy Hay, Roddy Warren thing. So, I mean, you're talking about a real good bronc rider, and it's it's hard to differentiate when I put it into these eras. Number one is the horses. They got better, and so I've watched all these guys. Dwayne Daines in Calgary when he won Calgary that time, and the token picture that Jack Daines uses on his poster, and I forget that old mare's name. I mean, that was as good a bronc ride as you'll ever see. Spectacular.
What made Mel Coleman different than other guys? What made him special, and especially in Canada to win seven titles too? That's saying something as well.
Yeah, the determination, I think. I mean, he'd go hard. He went everywhere, and he was he rode them all sort of similar, all the same. I mean, I thought like I say, I dwell on the lifting on, handle your rein, set your feet. He did that good. He had a totally different style than say somebody like Winston Bruce. Winston Bruce sat way back in his saddle and lifted on the rein, but way back in the saddle. Okay, so you get a guy like Mel Coleman, he really leaned ahead a little more. Daines a little more, leaning ahead sort of thing. Roddy Warren kind of leaned more ahead in any of the pictures you see. Some of them guys were way back in their saddles, and then some of them kind of rode on the top of the cantle of their saddle, like say, Roddy Hay. I mean, he rode more on the top of his cantle than he did down on the seat, but it worked for him. So different styles, totally different styles here. Like Winston Bruce was down deep in his saddle, and Coleman was kind of deep in his saddle. Roddy Hay was on the cantle. They're different styles. I mean, we got a whole bunch of different style bronc riders on that list.
And yeah, it's I probably haven't seen. I think I saw a video of Marty Wood that the Wrangler Network put together for the 60th edition of the NFR. So I've seen a bit of him, but I haven't seen a lot of these other guys. I haven't seen any film or much for photos. I don't know the whole story, but.
Well, Marty Wood was my hero, and I was when I rode broncs. I was the tail end of that era with Marty, Kenny, and Winston. And like I said at the start of the show, everybody was riding for fourth when them guys rode because they were the best. I will say Marty Wood had a style when he kind of whipped his arm and forwards and backwards, and it was so very unique. And I guess the one thing I'd say about Marty that made me in awe was that when he could make an average horse look 2 points better than he really was. I mean, he had a knack of, making, for lack of a better word, a dink look really good, and that was his forte. I mean, he could make them, 18.5 point hoppers look like they're 20, and the judges would believe it. And the thing about Marty, they loved him in Calgary. He won Calgary lots of times. And Enoch Walker, who was a great bronc rider back in that era, and he made the statement. He said, Marty Woods could win Calgary on a bale of hay. It didn't matter. So he was, there's another guy, totally different style, lift on your rein, set your feet, whip your arm. I mean, I could go on and on all day about him. He's a good one.
So based on, I'm going by points just to make this list, because I got to make a list at some point. But next on my list, I've got Pete Knight, and he was born in the United States, but has a lot of ties to Canada here. Grew up in the Crossfield area at one point, but 4-time world champion, 1932, 33, 35, and 36. And another source says he won 4 Canadian titles, but at the time there was no official Canadian title that I have anywhere recorded. So I've got him at 4 world titles.
That's a tough one for me. Like I don't think they used dirt flanks in 1932. And
oh wow,
I don't think they used flanks in 1932. Every picture I've ever seen of Pete Knight, the horses are kind of raring. I mean, it's a total different style altogether. I'd really be, lying if I said I knew that, how he could ride.
What, you were talking about something there too, Dustin? We cut you off.
I was gonna say, yeah, there definitely wasn't any flanks at that point in time. Yeah, your back cinch.
So with a guy like that in the 30s, we kind of have to put an asterisk there too, with the way things were. That's kind of probably best to put him on that kind of on a side note, the same as we have Glenn O'Neill with not being possibly, not technically being Canadian.
Yeah, it's hard to place him on their own. I mean, we're basing everything on what written stuff is, but I mean, at the same time, I would think, a guy with those amount of accolades that he had at that time, to say that he probably wouldn't have the same thing if you moved him up. I mean, he probably would, but I mean, it's long before I was even
before your parents and grandparents were around. Yeah. Wacey, we haven't heard from you in a long time. How are you doing? What are you thinking?
Well, like I mentioned before, this is kind of an area out of my expertise, and I mean, I watched guys like the Rod Hayes and Glenn O'Neill's growing up, and even guys like Dustin, and it's kind of been cool, like, to see Zeke on this list, where like I've known Zeke for a long time now, and we kind of grew up together. And you guys made a good point about how, like, looking at his career in 5 years, because he's still in the midst of his career, is kind of similar to the points we had with like Tanner Byrne and Dakota Butter, because they're still in the middle of their careers, or Tanner was anyways. So it's kind of interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see how this ends up when guys like that kind of get further along.
Next on the list, based on the points, I've got Kenny McLean, 1962 world champion, 3 times average champion at the finals between 64, 68, 71, 5-time Canadian champion, and a 9-time NFR qualifier. And just to throw a wild card in there, we've got a tie-down roping qualification to the NFR, and I believe 1971 as well. Wayne, would you speak to Kenny McLean first?
I traveled with Kenny McLean and Malcolm Jones, and he'd probably go way high on my list. I don't think that anybody spurred horses out any better than Kenny McLean. I don't think hardly anybody handled a rein any better than Kenny McLean. Christensen Brothers Rodeo used to have a horse called War Paint. He was the terror in that era, where he would really jump and kick out of that chute. He weighed like 1,600. And if you spurred him out, he'd buck you off. And if you didn't spur him out, he'd still buck you off. So in Pendleton, but that's what sticks out in my mind about Kenny. He spurred Warpaint out for 2 jumps and made probably a 22.5 or 23-point ride on him. It sticks in my mind, and that's a long time ago, 40 years ago probably. And I don't think that anybody spurred horses actually as hard as Kenny McLean did. I don't think that anybody rode ranker horses than Kenny McLean. Terry Kenny McLean said one time that Larry Kane was the hardest guy in the world to throw off, and I debate that. I think Kenny was. I mean, he's so high on my list that I mean he's all time. Whenever I've seen him, the only time I ever seen him get bucked off was in Denver when they used to bring the Bucking Horse of the Year and World Champion bronc rider. They used to do that on one of the performances in Denver, and it was quite an attraction at that time. And Big John was bucking good, and he was a Harry Knight horse. He weighed like 1,600 pounds. Come from Jerry Myers in Saskatchewan, and Kenny spurred him out for it seemed like 3 jumps, and he threw him off over his head. And that's the only time I can ever remember seeing Kenny McLean on the ground, and I watched him lots, and I traveled with him, and he's way up on my list.
Well, I'm looking at the information, the write-up on Kenny from the Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame, and it says in 77 outs at the NFR, he was bucked off only 5 times.
Well, that would totally be true. I just, like I said, the only time I ever really remember him, I'd probably seen that. I'd have probably been there at the NFR when they did buck him off. But he always said, I never could land very good. And I said, no, because you never got bucked off. You just always landed on his head or something. I don't think a bronc rider that lands good is doing that good anyway. I think.
Yeah.
But no, he was, first time I ever seen him, I think, was in my dad and Kessler took a rodeo to Vancouver, and on a train they went out there, and it rained about I think 15 of the 20 performances, and not much people. But that's when I first met Kenny McLean, and that's a long time ago. I was very young, and I said, who is this guy? Like, where did he come from? And he traveled with Ellie Lewis at that time, and they come out of Okanagan Falls, BC, and he rates way up on my list.
One of the things with this pro rodeo, with the Hall of Fame write-up, is it says that he was considered by many to be the greatest Canadian rodeo cowboy of all time. And I think if we're talking all around and both ends of the arena, he would probably be at the top of that list, which we can probably talk about in yet another show.
He roped calves as good as anybody in that era, and I think if he was in this era, he'd win money. He roped unbelievably. He was a bronc rider and a calf roper, and I mean he's a real cowboy, that guy. And he was a good guy. He was a little reluctant to travel. Is the only thing about him. He didn't like to go too much. But when I told you, like a half an hour ago, when somebody that would take advantage of a situation when they got a real good animal, that would be him. He had ice waters in his veins, that guy. He was cold-blooded when it come to winning. And yeah, way up on the list.
Next, I've got, based on the numbers again, Mel Highland, a two-time world champion, 1972 and 76, 5-time Canadian champion, spanning across 3 different decades from 1967 to 82, and 11 times to the NFR. He's 20 points ahead of Kenny. And would you agree with that, Wayne, or would you still have Kenny higher? How would you differentiate those two?
I'm a little torn there. Like, I wasn't in Cheyenne when he rode Morrow River. That's one of the horse that Harry Knight had. I've seen the video of it, and arguably maybe the best bronc ride I ever seen. I'm a little torn on this one because this guy goes right up on my list too. He spurred them all out. First time I ever seen him was in Pinoka, and he had a thing called Tar Baby, and he was in the novice bronc ride, and he had a little saddle, about a 13.5-inch saddle that he'd been practicing. And I seen him, and I was there, and he's Keith Hyland's nephew, right? And here he comes on this old hopper, nice 19-pointer, and this kid, I mean, it right in the neck and lifting on his rein, and I thought, like, where did this guy come from? And I mean, he was already, ready to win when he was like 17 years old. And I'm very high on him. I'm real torn on this deal. He goes way up on my list too.
What are your thoughts, Dustin?
Well, I mean, I didn't get to see Kenny ride, in person or whatnot, but be pretty. He looked like a pretty amazing bronc rider, pretty amazing person, pretty amazing cowboy. When it comes right down to it, like just a handy guy. Be able to just do anything, and to be as competitive as he was in multiple events. I think like if we're looking at super cowboy, all around, Kenny McLean is pretty amazing. His bronc riding, like Wayne said, you look at all of his pictures, and like if I wanted to emulate somebody, he would be one that I would I would like to flip through his picture book and then try to look like him in all my own pictures if I could. As far as Mel goes, Mel had a pretty big influence in my rodeo career and stuff, getting started. Spent a lot of time. Mel would come to the practice pen all the time when I was just starting out and help out. And then even, from that point, once I moved on from high school and went to college in Riverton, Wyoming for Rick Smith, then Mel was down there all the time. He was going down and training horses with Bill Smith. And so, I mean, he's always had a pretty big influence in my riding and helping me get to where I'm at. So, I mean, yeah, both of those guys are super high on my list. I mean, I don't know if I would be where Mel's got to I got to give Mel some of the credit for being where I got to. And yeah, as far as like rank bronc rides go, his ride in Cheyenne is easily in probably the top 3 best bronc rides of any bronc rider from any gender. Like anybody will, if you want, that ride is on everybody's list. I don't care if you're a good bronc rider, you've seen that, you've watched the Mills ride at Cheyenne multiple times, and yeah, everybody has something to say about that one, and they're all good. So yeah, as far as like impressive, they're both pretty high on my list. And I guess Mel would maybe be a little higher on mine simply because of the personal connection that I have to, knowing Mel and the way that he helped me get started, and not having that same deal with Kenny. But can't take anything away from any of his accomplishments and what he's done, that's for sure. And his picture on Warpaint, like Wayne was talking about, is probably one of the most used bronc riding pictures still today, as far as like marketing and stuff goes like that. Like, I mean, that picture turns up everywhere.
The next guy on our list here, I've got Rod Hay, number 2. 2007, he won the average at the NFR, qualified 20 times between 1989 and 2010. He qualified but would not compete. That last bucking horse he would have got on was in Innisfail the day I think I filled my pro card, maybe, or my permit, one or the other. I don't know which it was, but I remember being there that day. He's got 400 points from the NFR, 40 from winning the NFR average, and 8-time Canadian champion. Puts him at 520. I'll let you speak to Mr. Rod Hay first, Dustin.
Oh, I got lots I could say about Roddy. I mean,
tell us a story first, maybe. What's your best Rod Hay story? Maybe
best Rod Hay story is that if you're traveling with Rod Hay, we bet or gamble on everything as a competition. There's nothing that we didn't compete on or whatnot. There was nothing that we ever went out and did just because it seemed like it was fun. If we went go-karting, it was, if you lost, you were buying the hotel room. And if we went golfing, well, you were buying drinks. I mean, everything was, or you're buying dinner. I mean, there was nothing where it's just like, let's just go golfing and enjoy it. If we would do that, but if you were doing it with Roddy, there's got to be something's got to be on the line, because you don't just do it for fun. You got to do it. You do it for fun, and then there has to be something extra with it all the time. We gotta gamble, or we gotta bet something on everything. So, I mean, all super competitive, but I mean, always positive. Just hard to beat. Like, I mean, you can't keep that guy down. I mean, you can just keep kicking him, and he'll just keep getting back up until he he wins. And I mean, that tenacity and that, never give up thing, paid him in spades. And I mean, there's, live for big moments. I mean, there's another guy that like you put him there and, everybody else might be shaking in their boots and he would just be like, it's another day. Like, we're laughing and taking it, like we're back in the practice pen. And I mean, he thrives in those big moments and those big rides. And I mean, he's got his career, you can go back and you can look at it and the places where he's won and he's had success, there's, I mean, just, a lot of those rodeos, if you won them once in your career, you'd be happy. But I mean, he's got multiple Houston wins, and in Calgary, I mean, he bought a place with what he did at Calgary. I mean, just a winner, and yeah, could do it on rank horses, and he could ride any of them good too. Like it wasn't just like Roddy'd ride the good ones and the bad ones, and he'd make all of them look good.
What are your thoughts, Wayne? Would you still put on your list? Would you put Rod second overall without the world title?
First of all, he drives too fast. Dustin, you can testify to that. He went through Okotoks one day and I wanted to talk to him and I've seen him. I turned around trying to catch him. I hadn't have my cell phone on him. He's running like 140 and I'm trying to catch him and he drives fast.
Yeah, there's no way you're going to catch him. I wouldn't. He probably doesn't know it, but there was lots of time that I slept in the back seat of the truck, and that's only because I could lay down and do my seatbelt up still instead of the camper, and that was just because I was in fear for our like scared that there's no way that we could push it to the limit that bad all the time and not eventually get in a wreck or whatnot, and we never did, thank God. But yeah, there was more than once where I was just laying in the back seat as opposed to the camper or anything else, and I had my seatbelt done up across my lap back there. Even though
I never traveled with him, but those that did told me that if you want to get there fast, let him drive.
Yeah,
anyway, no, seriously, no, I just ditto on what Dustin said. I mean, the guy's a class act. He's a cowman. He's a family man. He could ride broncs. He's a winner. He's one of them that I dwelled on a little while ago that takes advantage of them situations because he's, I don't know what it is what pressure does to some people when they buckle, but he don't buckle. Never did. And like it don't matter if you're riding in an airplane with him or wherever you're at. He's always got a good attitude, and to sum him up, he was a winner.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well,
he was a winner.
If you want to explain Roddy, the best thing every time, I mean, as a rodeo cowboy, you always have free time during the day or whatnot, and we have time to kill lots of time. The rodeo is not till the evening, and so you go to the odd go-kart track or whatever. And the first question that Roddy Hay always asked every time that we ever went to any place and we ever went go-karting is the guy goes through the rules and tells you what you had to do and all this stuff. And Roddy's first question would be to the guy every single time, yeah, but has anybody ever done it without using the brakes? And that's the way he drives. That's the way, he's pedal to the metal, flat out. He's going for first every time. He's not worried about hitting the ground. He wants to win first. And if he doesn't win first, he's going to go down in flames kind of thing. And that's what makes Roddy, that's what made him great, and that's what makes him scary when you're competing against him, is that he's not going to hold anything back. You're going to get all of it.
Yeah, and the only best part of it is, Dustin, that he's got a couple of kids coming up, and they act just like him. So I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, the apple didn't fall that far from. I always say hit every branch on the way down.
No, both of them are great kids, and both of them ride really well. And we're famous for our bronc riders in Canada, and we need them more coming just like them.
The last name on the list that I have here, and I'm curious if we might have a general consensus at the top, but Marty Wood, 3-time world champion, 14 times to the NFR, and a 15th qualification where he didn't compete. Won the NFR average title in 1966 and was a 3-time Canadian champion. between 1958 and 1974. Long career, 54, 55, 63 on the Canadian titles. Also was a 4-time reserve world champion, according to the numbers. Is there anybody else that like he's kind of our undisputed number one if I'm guessing across all three of us, but I want to get your thoughts first, Wayne.
Marty Wood's come from Bowness, Alberta. His dad owned a dude string thing, and he rode saddle horses all his life. And he never was a ranch, much of a, like a ranch cowboy or anything like that. But when he come on the scene, this looked like a matinee idol out of a movie. He's a good-looking guy and good-shaped hat, and he just, Casey Tibbs was, all dressed in purple and rode. Marty come along, and he was the next star in that generation. And like I said, he whipped his arm, which was an amazing thing. And he'd whip his arm in front of him and then back behind. It was just a style that he adopted from somebody. And I tried to copy it, and a couple of times, and I didn't end up so good. It knocked your balance right off. But he could do it, and a good guy, and a high class guy, and he rode an old white Thunderbird and back in the day, and full of class, and he was basically my idol when I was starting to ride broncs, and I looked up to him, and he ended up living in Pendleton until he passed away here, maybe a year ago, and just first class though. I traveled, I got to travel with him some, and good attitude, and he lived first class, and he was first class, and his bronc riding ability, like I said, he could make something out of not much, and better than most people I ever seen. He'd make an 18-pointer look. He thought he was 21. It's just he had that ability, and that's common knowledge. People talked about that. Put Marty on an average horse, and for lack of a better word, he would dress him up.
Well, you mentioned Casey Tibbs, but we could make a list of the greatest ever in the entire world, and a lot of the names on this list would likely be on that best ever in the entire world. But Casey Tibbs is, I think he'd be a 4-time world champion, or a lot of our guys on this list in Canada would contend in that world list. Really, there wouldn't be a whole bunch of guys. You'd have Billy Etbauer, Casey Tibbs. There'd be a bunch more, Dan Mortensen, but there'd be a few of these names on that list of the best ever in the entire world.
Oh yeah, if we went and put a bronc riding list together of best bronc riders in the world or ever, there's three or four of these guys at least that are going to make that list easily.
What are your thoughts on Marty Wood though, Dustin? Is he your number one, or would you?
Yeah, I would have to say. I mean, what Marty won and what he could do, and I mean, I didn't get to see him ride. I've seen videos and everything of it, and got to meet him several times. And every time that I ever was around him or met him, he was just seemed like he was super good guy. I mean, he was easy to get along with, easy to visit with for myself anyway. And I mean, what he was able to do, and what he got done are pretty hard to argue with his resume. It's pretty amazing and remarkable as far as like if you wanted to be a bronc rider and that's what you wanted to do, you'd be lucky. You would say that you had a good career if you did half of what Marty Wood did in his.
Do we have any other closing thoughts? I've kept you guys way longer than I initially agreed to, so we better wrap it up here quick. But is there any closing thoughts here?
Oh, I'd just say, sure, you haven't kept us that long. We're talking about things that we like, and we got nothing but time. So
okay.
I think, I mean, I'd say Canada's been known for its bucking horses and for its bronc riders, and I think the ones that are there would be on anybody's list, like you said. And if we talked about the best bronc riders in the world, I think there's lots of these guys here. And I mean, I think there's lots more that are coming up. And if we did this in 5 more years, there might be a whole bunch of new names coming up. I mean, that's one thing we've always managed to find talented bronc riders and be able to raise them. And part of that's because we have super bucking horses up here. And we've been known for bronc riders, and I don't think anything's going to change in the past, present, or the future as far as that's concerned.
Wayne, what do you have for closing thoughts before we wrap it up here?
Well, it's been a great conversation, and this is a great list of bronc riders. I'm a little torn if you're going to try and pick who we think is the best one. There's different categories of those that go harder and try harder, and those that are fancy, and those that stay on longer and all that stuff. So, great conversation. And like I said, I can't dwell on enough that the horses kept getting better. And if, some of the guys back in different eras had the advantage of the horses that we have today, they might win more awards. But if you take all the guys that are on this list and if put them all at the same age, there'd be 10 guys that all capable of winning, right? I mean, it's hard to take Marty Woods and Kenny McLean in that era and put them in with Zeke Thurston and like Zeke is right at the top of my list because he hasn't finished what he's going to be able to do, So it's pretty hard to to not put him up there. I mean, I'm high on this guy, and I think there's a guy that takes advantage of a good situation right there, Zeke Thurston. I mean, that's what makes him so good. And I think that in 5 years from now, if we're having this conversation, his marks could be, higher than anybody.
I totally agree with you. He could be, I think he's 24 or 5 at this point. He could be a 5-6 time world champion by the end of this. He could be one of the greatest in the history of the sport. It's there's no telling.
Absolutely.
You brought up a point to put them all. If you put everybody at the same age, who would you put at the very top of just in the pure bronc riding? If all these guys, all the 12 we have here together, were at the NFR at the same time. Yeah, Dustin, what do you think? All 10 of them at the same time at the NFR.
Sure.
Who's your pick? If Rod's making you bet on it, what are your?
When Wayne's seen more of them than I have, ask the guy that's seen a few of us, the least of them in real life. You know what? That's awful tough question. If I was gonna, because I mean, like Wayne said, everything's the era that they're in and the horses, the caliber of the horses and stuff that they got on. But oh man, I got to pick one out of 10. Hey, that's what we've been talking about this for hours, and now I feel like I'm on the spot. Like we're at Calgary for 100,000 or something here right now, or we're 10th round right now, Ted. But I'd have to say, just because I seen him when he was a kid, and I thought that doesn't matter what he's going to do, whatever he picks up, he's going to be great at. I think Zeke Thurston is probably the guy that if I had to pick when it's all said and done, at all the things that and because of where he's at and what I think he's got left, I think Zeke's probably the guy.
Wacey, who do you think?
That's a hard question for me too, because I've only seen a handful of these guys. But just given, seeing Zeke in those situations, those when you got to ride to win and that kind of thing, I think Zeke would be my guy as well. Like given his three-time winning at the Calgary Stampede in a row, and then obviously winning 2 world championships, he knows how to win when money's in the line. So I think Zeke would definitely be my guy.
Before you go, Wayne, I'm gonna pick Rod Hay, just because he was probably one of the guys that was a hero in my career that got me into rodeo and wanted to be involved in this sport, and was somebody I've known his name since the very beginning. So I've been a Rod Hay fan for a long time. I'm going to go with Rod Hay, but I'll leave you with the last pick, Wayne.
Well, I'm torn between Kenny McLean and Zeke Thurston. And because what Zeke is capable of, I'm going to go with Zeke. And I don't want to offend any of my friends out there, but Kenny McLean, of course, is not with us anymore. Different situations here. That's a tough question. But I'm going on what Zeke can do, too, as well as what he's done. So I'm going with Zeke.
So 3 Zekes and 1 Rod. Hey, geez, you guys really went against me on that one. But I'll I guess we better wrap it up though. Since the name of the show is Cowboy Shit, I'd like to get a definition from you guys. We've been collecting these from everyone since we started. So Dustin, I probably didn't tell you we were going to do this, but what's your definition of Cowboy Shit?
I would say just somebody or something that's, I mean, you're not going to take no for an answer. You're going to be your own man, be a maverick. You're not afraid to go out and, buck the odds and take chances. And if it gets tough, you're willing to get tough too.
Wayne, what's your definition?
Well, Cowboys, they're a great breed. And I've made a lot of friends, and I've seen a lot of generations come and go. And hopefully we get through what we're doing and we see more generations, that are coming up. And that's probably one of the most interesting things to me is, like, I was born into this, right? From my dad, and I've never really had a real job, so I just sort of cruised through doing this. And I've watched a lot of generations of cowboys come and go. There's a lot of good ones and a lot of friends, and have come and gone, and we've got friends that are still around. And what's kind of sad for me is when them really good cowboys or any of the cowboys that are my friends, and then, one day you see them and then the next day they're off and, they quit, and it's just like another chapter. And so I'd say the continuation on with the next generation of cowboys, I look forward to. And like I said, we're sitting here at home, we're all dressed up and we're ready to go, and looking forward to, seeing my friends again, because them cowboys are my friends.
Well, he's a bucking horse rider, and he likes them a little wilder than most. And you can tell just by looking, though he'd be the last one to boast. Unless he'd been drinking, but hell, he's been dry now for months. Well, he's a bucking horse rider. He won up at Calgary once.
Thanks again to Wayne Vold and Dustin Flundra for being on the show this week to talk about the greatest bronc riders ever in Canadian history. Hell of a list we put together there, hey Wace. So I guess we better recap just to begin. So for those, you've already listened, but just to recap on the list, we've got a couple honorable mentions. So Glenn O'Neill has 370 points, which would have put him in the top 10, but he wasn't born in Canada, so we still had to mention him, that he's a guy that very well could be on the list, but for our sake, is a Canadian citizen but wasn't born here. So our list was the top 10 Canadian born, and it kind of gives us a little more. It kind of gives us a little more leeway to add a couple more names to the list that wouldn't have made it otherwise. So I'm okay there. And then Pete Knight, 400 points, but he was born in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Is that right? Where's Philadelphia?
Pennsylvania. Yep.
It is. Yeah. Okay. I don't know my Northeast geography very well, but yeah, Pete Knight, 400 points.
You have a big map on your wall in your living room.
Yeah, but that's the world. That's not the whole planet, man. Give me a break. But anyways, that would have put him number 6 on our list ahead of Rod Warren, and then with 400 points, it would have been number 5 for Pete Knight. But anyways, going back reviewing the list, number 10 was Dwayne Danes with 190 points, and in number 9th spot was Carl Olsen, the 1947 PRCA World Champion, 210 points. Go to number 8, Winston Bruce, 1961 World Champ. He had 320 points, 10 NFRs, a world title, and 2 Canadian titles. Going to number 7 is our only current contestant. It's Zeke Thurston, 2-time world champ in 2016 and 2019. 2019 Canadian champ, 5 NFR qualifications and an NFR aggregate title. Puts him in at 350 points for number 7. Go to number 6 is Rod Warren. Did I say 350? That's right. So Rod Warren, number 6, 4 NFR aggregate titles. 3 of them were in a row. 9 NFR qualifications and 2 Canadian titles. And another, I think he's a 9-time Canadian all-around champion too, if I remember right, which is pretty impressive too. But we're just talking bronc riders. Mel Coleman, number 5, 390 points, 16 consecutive NFRs from 74 to 89, 7-time Canadian champion as well. Kenny McLean, number 4, 450 points. He was the world champ in 62, the year after Winston Bruce. Won the NFR average 3 different times, 5-time Canadian champion, 9-time NFR qualifier, and also made the NFR on the tie-down roping, which is pretty wild. Brings us to number 3. Yeah, brings us to number 3, Mel Highlands, 470 points. He's the 1972 and 1976 world champion, 5-time Canadian champion, and 11 qualifications to the NFR. Pro Rodeo Hall of Fame inductee, 1996 is what, the only guy that isn't in the Hall of Fame on our list here is Zeke. So far, he's the only current guy. Everybody else is in the Hall of Fame.
I feel like he's well on his way.
Yeah, absolutely. He's should be one of those guys, and they're probably. I hope that it becomes that way by the time that Zeke retires. He'd be a first ballot as soon as he's done. He should be in, rather than waiting around like some of our guys have to, which is kind of bullshit in my opinion. But that's a story for another time. Rod Hayes, number 2 on our list. He had 520 points, and this was one of the what would you say, dilemmas I had with this list, because Rod wasn't a world champion, but he went to 20 NFRs, which is more than anyone else on our list.
Yeah.
So, and he was the 8-time Canadian champion. He has more Canadian titles than anybody else. Also won the NFR average in 07. So points-wise, he's ahead, but I don't know if you really could rank him higher. Sometimes,
if you're going off the point system, then you just got to ride it
out.
With the point system.
That's what it is.
Yeah, that's the way it is.
So that's the way the cookie crumbles. Rod Hay, number 2, and number 1, Bowness, Alberta's Marty Wood, 650 points, 3-time world champion, 1958, 64, 1966, 14 NFRs, 1 NFR aggregate title, and 3 Canadian titles. Marty Wood, 650 points. Just for comparison, our top bull rider on our list, Daryl Mills, had 250. So I don't think we're definitely not gonna find anyone else in our in the greatest Canadians in the rodeo business with more than 650 points. Marty Wood.
Yeah, if you're doing the list of the greatest Canadian rodeo athletes, that's probably the top one by far.
Yeah, he'd have to be one of the top ones. I don't know anybody else that could get much closer. So yeah, Marty Wood. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Hope that way. Thanks again to Wayne Vold, Dustin Flundra for being on the show. That was a really fun conversation. A lot of good stories.
Yeah, it's cool to have two guys from 2 different generations and be able to kind of talk and speak to everybody. And,
yeah,
it was neat.
I liked it.
Super cool, bro.
Okay, so we're still in quarantine. What have you been doing?
This is social distancing episode, what, number 3?
I think 2 or 3. I forget now. Yeah. I've lost track of most of my life at this point.
The days seem to blend together. It's just turned into a perpetual Sunday.
It's weird. It's real weird.
Yeah.
Well, and then, but now in Canada, thankfully, it's warm again, which is glorious. Geez. There's the snow is almost gone.
Delight.
Yeah, the snow is almost gone in my backyard. 7 months after it's first landed there, back last fall.
Okay.
Holy crow, that was a long winter, man.
I think that'll help. I think that'll help out with some nice weather and some sunlight. Will help turn some people's spirits around a bit.
Oh, it's turned my spirits around. Definitely.
Yeah, for sure.
Definitely. So, what have you been doing though?
What have I been doing? I've been TikTok. studying for still making TikToks, putting out some content there.
Yep. Have you made it big yet?
Studying for.
Do you have more than 10 followers?
I have almost 400 followers now.
Oh, that's pretty good. It's pretty good. That's almost. Yep.
I had my first video reach 10,000 views today, this week.
That's almost more than families watching now, Wace. That's big. That's big,
not
man.
Too bad. Big. I have another one that's hot on its tails for 10,000 views, so nice. Get some traction on a few of them, which is cool.
So you're almost viral, is what you're saying.
I think so. I don't know what the definition of viral is.
It's a million,
when it comes to TikTok, so
don't.
Oh yeah, so I'm not.
Not even close. Yeah.
yeah, I've just been studying for finals, and I bought a bike today, a mountain bike. So I'm gonna be able to do some ripping around. I got some good news about my knee this week, which is nice.
Yeah,
I'm on the mend. I can start running and doing more activities and kind of building some more strength and that whatnot back. So that's kind of a positive on my end of things. Yeah.
Right on. Well,
yeah. How about
me? Oh, not much.
How about,
Taking the dog for lots of walks. Don't have to shovel the water out of the driveway anymore because it's the low spots. It's drying up. The snow's almost gone. We took a bunch of stuff from Don's the other day. He gave me a whole bunch of stuff, taking over the boot business and all this different stuff. So we had catalogs and just all sorts of stuff, banners and ton of stuff. So we went through all that the other day, got it all cleaned up, found a couple of cool old pieces. I got to send you some pictures of these things. I'll put them on the social media too, but we got these snuff can lids, these CPR, like Pro Rodeo Canada snuff can lids with the old Maple Leaf logo on them. They're pretty wicked. So found some cool stuff. Yeah, just living though, man. You know, I don't know what else is going on.
Living.
By the time, well, actually, I don't know how to say this, but I don't want to jinx it, but we might have a really, really big guest on the next show, our biggest yet. Ooh. So I don't want to jinx it on who it is, or I'm not going to say anything until we have the recording ready to go and it's all good. So just going to leave you guys with a little teaser that we got a big show, really big show coming up for 64.
Stay tuned
for 64. So I think we'll wrap it up there, Wayce. You got anything else? You had one question you were going to ask, but I forgot what it was.
Yeah, so a question that I was thinking of the other day is like, when was the time you were most scared getting on the bull?
Paradise Valley. I don't know if the bull's name was like Little, or I don't know what the hell his name was. He was some crazy son of a bitch from Gurlitz's. Originally, it was like a black and white bull. I think they called him Remington Crazy at one point, or Remington Country, and I called him Remington Crazy because there was a screw loose on this bull. But he was just the meanest, the meanest bull in the history of, like, I don't know, like he wasn't like Oklahoma Wishes mean, but like not many people had to attempt their fate against that bull. But like I didn't want anything to do with this thing, and I think I got on 4 bulls that night because I think it was a 2-header and I double-entered for some stupid reason. And I was rattled by this fucking bull. He was real bad, man. Tanner Gillitz would know the name of that thing. I'd have to ask him again now. But I was totally terrified. Never been more scared in my life. Like, just didn't want anything to do with this bull. And did not even probably get past the end of the chute gate. It was real bad. Like, I might as well have just turned out because I was scared.
You're already beat before you even got on.
Yeah, it was bad. It was near the end, so... I knew not long after that I didn't want to ride the bull that bad, so.
That's fair enough.
What do you got?
I would say I have a tie for first. The first one would be I was at a bull riding in Rimby a few years back, and I got on a bull in Nansen Vold's, just a calf, and I was hanging my rope in the run-up alley on him. He was trying to like dig under the run-up alley and get out and like gator rolling and like.
Yeah, this bull,
scary.
The same thing with me, man. Like, this thing was like he was trying to hook the paint off the fence. He was that mean.
Yeah. Then I go to get on, they run him in, I go to get on him, and he's sweating, like full on sweating beads. And I'm just like, fuck, like this bull's going to kill me. I'm dead. And he actually ended up just hopping out there and flat spinning to the left. So I got by him. But he did run me over after a few times. So
he did, yeah.
He did live up to the hype.
Yeah.
And then the other time was in Arrowwood. I got on this calf of Josh and Tammy for days, and man, this thing was like the scariest thing I've ever been on. He was in the back fence, you could just see him. He was heads up, like looking at you, ears forward, and just like.
Did he pass?
We're not even getting along from the beginning, and so they run him into the chute, and there's 3 guys sitting on the chute gate. He hooks all 3 of the guys off the chute gate.
Oh wow!
I'm like, I'm fucking gonna die.
That's impressive.
But this is me. Yeah, and I was like, okay, here we go. So get on him, shoot, whatever. Get out on him, and yeah, I like probably couldn't have checked out faster, and he was hot on my tail. But those are a couple times, and I was just absolutely terrified.
There was one time I was a little more worried when we were it was Vernon, Texas. There was this old bull called Gunsmoke, I think was his name. He's a black and white whatnot. I've got a cool picture on him from there that day too. He might have made a cool jump out, like first jump out, and I was kind of kicked back, like it was cool. But he just like kind of kicked and went around to the left, and I rode him for like a 76 or something. Then he kind of jumped straight, and I got off, and everybody told me he was extra mean, and I like got off running and was like did a full leap over the fence, like the whole clutch the fence and kick your legs up over it. So
yeah,
I survived and didn't. I made out of it unscathed. But
did he live up to the hype though? Was he extra mean?
Oh yeah, like he chased me. Like he chased me down. Like I got off him, but he chased after me, and I freaking piled over the fence. So I didn't get killed.
I just thought of another funny one. I was in Midale, Saskatchewan, and Cody Stranquist used out this old bull called Snowjet. He was
what's his name?
He wasn't bad when he was young. Snowjet. But I think Snowjet.
Yeah.
I think he got older. He got way meaner. So whenever I got on him, and he hopped out around the right, and I rode him, and he had one horn on his left side, and as soon as I like shifted my weight to like look over my shoulder and get off, he turned back and put that horn right in my fucking tailbone, and I was crippled. Like I couldn't move, and he's like hooking the piss out of me, and some guy from behind the gate, like there's a chute panel, right, the panel of the arena, grabbed me by the top of my vest and pulled me under the chute panel because I couldn't move.
Oh wow,
it was pretty funny.
Dang.
Yeah, he was a mean old sucker.
Dang. Good times. Good times. Glad we're done that part of our lives. We can not have to do that. So that's good. Good. We had a good time though. I enjoyed the times when I stayed on. So
yeah, me too, man. It's good times.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for doing this, Wace. Hopefully,
no worries, buddy.
Looks like we're in this for a while here. A few more cancellations. Last I checked, the CPRA had canceled already 25% of their season. The PBR though, they're coming back this weekend in Guthrie, Oklahoma, with televised events. So we'll report on that after those couple events. See how she goes. Well, we get to watch some bull riding. I'm looking forward to that part. We'll see how she goes. So here we go. Thanks, Wace. Thanks again, Wayne Vold, Dustin Flundra, for being on the show. And this has been Cowboy Shit with Ted and Wacey, episode number 64.
Wild horse rider with nothing to lose. Old cassette tapes, Chris Ledoux. 6 bronc riders in a minivan, gonna make it to the whistle and the pickup man. Start to shoot 1 and I'm to shoot 5, working their way right on down the line. 8-second whistle is all I need. Keep your feet in rhythm and out of them D's. Jump or jump, make that ride. Sit back and watch that spur still fly. Break that neck in perfect time. This ain't no brain entertainment, it's a wild bronc ride.